Now I want to transition to another technique that works very well in conflict, and that is the role of apologies. Now, apology is a form of de-escalation, and it works very effectively to relax the body, create connection with the other person. In general, it helps. Obviously, each situation is unique. So the apology context, so to speak, in U.S. academic culture, because apologizing and all our interactive skills and communication skills vary based on culture, both varies within the United States and varies around the world. So in academic culture, intellectual critique, objective independence, and expertise, especially in higher education, are often valued over interpersonal warmth and relationships and connection. So apologies in higher education are often underutilized, even though they're a highly effective form of connection, empathy, and de-escalation. Because in academic culture, they're seen as unnecessary. They're seen as from a fear of, I'll appear weak if I apologize. I'm supposed to be an expert. There's a fear of reducing the perceived authority or perceived expertise when we apologize. And that's part of the culture of I'm intellectual, I'm an expert, I'm objective, so I shouldn't have to apologize. And apologizing is not seen as being intellectual enough. It's like you're not as smart as others if you have to apologize. And there's a fear of appearing to lack confidence. And many of the, especially faculty, are rewarded for showing confidence as an expert. So if they make a mistake and have to apologize, it can touch on that fear. And all of these things can lead to conflict. But it's also a reason why maybe in higher education, as opposed to other environments, you'll see less apologizing because of those beliefs. It's still as effective in higher education to actually do an apology. And oftentimes we have to learn the apology. For example, when a president will often apologize for something someone did on behalf of the university because they know that relationships are important and the president is responsible, and so they will take an action which actually does cause connection and empathy and helps release the conflict or reduce the intensity of the conflict. So there's 6 steps to apologizing. So neuroscience shares can reduce the threat response in the brain when you give and when you receive an apology. So the 6 steps are: you acknowledge that something has happened, that there was a mistake or there was some sort of issue that caused conflict. Take responsibility for the part of it that you are involved in. And I think this is key because you're not taking responsibility for everything if you didn't cause everything. What you're doing is taking responsibility for your part, which actually creates that sense of connection. And the other makes it more likely the other person will do the same. Although that's not guaranteed, you can only control your own reaction to a certain degree. And you have to give people the freedom to react how they might want. Then express genuine regret if you feel genuine regret. And explain the context, which is, how did this happen, And what was involved, if you can share that, because sometimes it's too personal, you can't. But if you can explain the context, do. Then make amends, which is the apology. And there may be other parts to it, like let me fix the chair that I accidentally broke or something. Or it could be more advanced than that. Let me rewrite your paper for you. No. Or you can, and then you commit to change. Like, what's going to be different? Because remember, in conflict, there are those underlying values, goals, beliefs. And when you commit to change, those probably aren't going to change. It's how those show up in the relationship with the person with whom you're having a conflict. So committing to change is important, and it's a work. And both of the people or the group of people have to work together. And this is why it's so important to train people in how to manage conflict, because then they know how to apologize and when, or if they should apologize, because you don't want to do it all the time. It's when it's really called for. These things are very important. So again, apologies reduce the threat response of the brain. It reduces the amygdala activation, that fight or flight, freeze, fawn. That part of your brain, it reduces the control it has. Again, it's called the amygdala hijack, when it takes over your thinking and functioning behavior. And when you apologize, it reduces the effects or the control of the amygdala. It activates empathy. It activates those mirror neurons. It activates your sense of shared understanding. And what's key with an apology is it restores trust and social bonding chemically by stimulating the release of oxytocin, which is one of those chemicals in the brain that isn't always a pleasure, but it helps to link people together and feel connected. So again, apologizing, even though sometimes it's very difficult, restores trust and social bonding chemically by stimulating the release of oxytocin, which I think is a key thing for us to learn. Now, I have an activity for you, and to do the activity, you'll want to pause during it, and then once you're done with the activity, then keep going with the presentation. So the activity is called What Would You Do? And the situation is, during a class discussion, two students begin talking over each other. The exchange becomes heated, and the classroom environment becomes tense. Now act as if your role is as a GA, or the graduate teaching assistant, GTA, and you're responsible, as every faculty member is or instructor is, for maintaining a respectful and productive learning environment. Based on what we've talked about so far, what would neuroscience say about how you might be reacting? What would you most likely use to de-escalate yourself? Because we should always have our attention on ourselves as well. And what might you do to improve the communication between the two students? So that's your key. Pause here and respond to that. If you're by yourself, just write out what you do or think it through. If you're with a group, then come up with what you would do and then share it with each other. And then start it up again once you've all shared with one another. So now, again, options to de-escalate a conflict. One is to project calmness. And that is remain composed and speak in an even tone to model self-regulation. And when you do that, the other person picks up on that same calmness, either consciously or unconscious, or both. Use reflective listening. Let's pause. I want to make sure everyone's voice is heard. This is in response to the classroom activity that you just did. So as the GA or GTA, you can say, or any role you have, let's pause. I want to make sure everyone's voice is heard. Let's speak one at a time. You go first and help manage their communication so they each get airtime. Then set physical and verbal boundaries. Use open body language, like that means reduce the amount of crossed arms, things like that. Now, mind you, crossed arms does not always mean defensiveness or anger or frustration. Sometimes it's just a comfortable way to hold yourself, or sometimes there's some discomfort you're managing. And it depends on where you've been raised and how you think about things, culture. But in general, use open body language. Face the people you're talking with, the two students. Open your hands up so you don't look like you're judging them, and speak that way. And then you can ground them back from the heated exchange by saying, let's refocus on the topic. Now, you share first, you share second, and you kind of divide it up that way. And you're using your authority. Remember, while you're doing this, you want to get your own calmness together, which means focus on breathing from the belly, not from the chest. Take a deep breath. and calm your body, and you can do that even more effectively. Then focus your attention. If you're up front and you're doing a PowerPoint or presentation and you're flipping slides or whatever, then suddenly stop that, turn away from it. To reduce distractions, make intentional eye contact with the two students and validate both of their perspectives. You each have a different way of seeing it. This is not the time to win. This is the time to share your perspectives. And then finally, follow up. Speak with each student separately afterwards if possible. I know that's not always possible. It's the ideal though. And then if you can manage it, you have a meeting with each one individually and then bring the two together and talk about what helped, go through the steps, what happened, take responsibility, express genuine regret if they haven't, explain the context, like why they got heated to each other, and help them make amends and commit to change. Now, this is a second activity. Same process. I'm going to introduce activity. You pause, and then I'll go to the solution. Activity 2. What would you do? Here's the situation. Your faculty advisor, supervisor gives you last-minute instructions and seems frustrated when you ask for clarification. Your role as a GA or GTA. And if you're a full-time faculty or instructor or something, just imagine this relatively similar role. You are learning to balance your assistantship while managing academic and other responsibilities. So, especially when you first get into grad school, you are bombarded with all these typically new expectations, new environment. You're trying to figure things out. You're not sure of yourself. You may have imposter syndrome. You've got all that going on. So based on the previous slides and content, what would neuroscience say about how you might be reacting to all the academic and other responsibilities? What would you most likely use to de-escalate yourself? Again, what works for de-escalating you, for calming you? And then what might you do to communicate more effectively with your faculty supervisor? Because you saw they got frustrated. If you go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, those are our responses to someone who has more authority, like a faculty member or supervisor. At the same time, is that the most effective thing to do? So try and de-escalate, make sure you understand why the frustration, and then depending on the best style for the situation, negotiate what should happen next and how to do things in the future. It doesn't mean you just appease. It means that you understand and find out a good solution for everyone involved. Now, here's the options to de-escalate. Notice your fear response. Internally check to see if you're withdrawing, reacting defensively, or going silent. Use a measured tone. Again, tone of voice is a key aspect to calming a situation. Ask a clarifying question. Can you help me understand how you'd like that done? So that you clarify. You may not want to because you're in conflict, but by doing that, they feel heard, and actually that will calm the faculty member down. And practice calm physical presence. Sit up or straighten your body, so that it looks like you're present and not being disrespectful. Make, again, non-threatening eye contact, which means look, but also look away, and that varies by culture as to what's considered respectful and what's not. And avoid rushed or anxious gestures. In general, around the world, slower movement is more associated with more calmness. So that's something to consider as well. Now, what we'd like you to do is choose one of these things to try in your actual work or in your role on campus. So look at one and just say, okay, I'm going to try just to focus on that so that when conflict happens, I use that first or I go to that first. And of course, you can use more than that. But choose one so it'll help you focus and be more likely to practice it. Because we know from the research that behavioral rehearsal is the best way to learn these responses. Because when you practice it frequently enough, then it just becomes part of your behavior, and you automatically calm yourself and others in a situation. Okay, here's activity number 3. What would you do? You and another grad assistant were both assigned to coordinate an event. The other GA accuses you of not following through on tasks you thought were their responsibility. Now, that's classic. I know I've experienced that. I'm sure many of you have already experienced that. So the role is you need to collaborate respectfully and resolve misunderstandings in a peer-to-peer context where you both have generally equal authority. So based on slides and content, what could you do to de-escalate the situation? What would you most likely use to manage yourself? And how would you communicate to de-escalate and try and improve the situation with your colleague? So pause here and work through that individually or in a group. And then start again once you're done. So options to de-escalate. Acknowledge their frustration. Take responsibility where appropriate. Clarify understanding so that you clarify expectations for now and in the future. And then commit to change. All these things cause a calmness to come over because people feel like their opinions are valued even if you don't agree. So those are important de-escalation techniques. So next we're going to talk about conflict intensity and styles. And these are based on a research Thomas Kilman conflict mode instrument, which is a measurement for your typical conflict style.